L is real theory. If you are true Nintendo fans, most of you must have heard of the L is real theory, a mysterious inscription found on a fountain in Mario 64. I know, you must say, this video isn't about Mario, but hear me out. Nobody knows what it means or what it's doing there, and you can find dozens of theories explaining it. For example, one theory explains that L means Luigi, and that Luigi was a playable character in Mario 64 and found only through accomplishing some complex tasks. However, in Zelda Ocarina of Time, and precisely the Dodongo's Cavern, we find the same inscription, which we can definitely rule out the fact that it could mean Luigi, because when we inspect it even further, it says, Giant Dead Dodongo. When it sees red, a new way to go will open, which is actually a puzzle that will help us progress in the dungeon. When we throw a bomb in this giant skull's eye and it turns red, a new path is revealed through its mouth. Until now, there is nothing special about it, right? But still, why is the same mysterious inscription from Mario 64? We know that Mario and the Zelda series are not strangers to each other, but that still doesn't explain the inscription. But if there is a direct link, no pun intended, between Zelda games and Mario, well, the inscription in Mario could mean Link is real. In the mentioned fountain in Mario, there are several boos. Boos, of course, are ghosts, and therefore are dead. Ring any bells? Well, in the fountain area, there is a giant dead boo. But I hear some of you say, so what? Mario doesn't have bombs. So how would you turn his eyes red? However, when you stand before him, well, all the giant boo technically sees is the red communist Mario, the red hat and the red shirt, and the boo becomes transparent and reveals a key inside him that leads to a new path. Obviously, there's a connection here. The inscription in the Mario game made a reference to the one in Zelda, and vice versa. Theory number 2. The Great Deku Tree. The Great Deku Tree is a guardian of the Kokiri. You know, the Peter Pan cosplays. After the first dungeon of Ocarina of Time, the Great Deku Tree succumbs to the curse afflicted to him by Ganondorf, and sadly withers and dies. But after Link clears the Forest Temple and awakens Saria as a sage, the Deku Tree's sprout takes root in the ground before his predecessor, but it will take hundreds of years to become the Great Deku Tree again. 100 years in the future, in Twilight Princess, the first dungeon that we go through is the Forest Temple. This dungeon is mysterious, because it doesn't have a clear origin or backstory. All we know is that it takes place inside an ancient big tree. Well, in this theory, this ancient big tree is none other than the second incarnation of the Great Deku Tree, which died as well. First, if you noticed, the Kokiri and Twilight Princess are nowhere to be found, although some theories suggest that the monkeys are the evolution of the Kokiri, but maybe that's far-fetched. However, even though the Kokiri are not present in the Forest Temple, their symbol is. Yep, that's the symbol of the Kokiri, which can affirm that indeed it is the Great Deku Tree. And maybe that the Kokiri in this timeline are extinct, since the Deku Tree is dead and not around to play their bodyguard. Another argument for this theory is the first meeting with the hero Shade, which happens just before the Forest Temple. In other words, the adventure starts just before the Deku Tree, which is the same in Ocarina. So we can say that there is a symbolic link between them. Also, Ganon's curse on the Deku Tree was, to be exact, a parasite. The boss of the Forest Temple is, yes, you guessed it, a parasite, which can be the cause of death of the second Deku Tree incarnation. Even the boss room resembles some parts of the Ocarina of Time Deku Tree dungeon. In Ocarina of Time, the Kokiri predicted that death and darkness will always return. And what do you know? It did in Twilight Princess. In the Ocarina of Time, there are 3 spiritual stones divided among 3 races. The Kokiri Emerald Stone, which was for the Kokiri, the Goron Ruby, and the Zora Sapphire. The 3 spiritual stones were created to serve as keys to open the way to the Sacred Realm, where the Triforce is kept. In Twilight Princess, there are 3 fused shadows that must be collected during the game. One in the Forest Temple, one in the Goron Mines, which is inhabited by Gorons, and another in Lake Bay Temple, which is home to the Zoras. Which leaves us with the Forest Temple, which is probably the Great Deku Tree. Remember, in Ocarina of Time, the Kokiri are not the ones who give you the Kokiri Emerald, but the Great Deku Tree itself. And if this is true, this means Link was playing with monkeys inside his friend's corpse. Theory number 3. One of the most famous theories regarding Majora's Mask is known as the Grief Theory. The Grief Theory basically indicated that Link initially lost his life in the Lost Woods, and rather than the adventure he went through in Termina being an alternative universe, it is Link's struggle to accept his own death. The structure of Termina is initially divided into 5 quadrants, or as indicated, the 5 faces of grief. In Clock Town, all of its citizens are battling the possibility of the moon crashing into Termina. They refer to it being preposterous, and if anyone flees the town from this possibility, he is considered a coward. Normally, daily activities still commenced in Clock Town, even with the overshadowing image of the moon's dastardly smile looming over them. This is the portrayal of denial, the first phase an individual goes through when a major loss occurs in their lives. As we leave Clock Town, we enter the second stage, anger. In Majora's Mask, this stage is portrayed as Woodfall Temple. The Deku King in Woodfall is enraged at a monkey and plans to execute him in the heat of the moment for the accusation that the monkey stole his princess daughter. All this was untrue of the monkey's doing, but it indicated the second stage of grief. The third stage of grief is known as bargaining, when the individual is attempting to give or is trying to reverse the outcomes of the inevitable. In Majora's Mask, this is Snowhead Temple. The Goron leader, Darmani, is unable to accept his death, even though he appears to Link in a phantom form. He begs Link to use his musical power to revive him from death so he can complete his task and rid the mountain of evil. In the Great Bay Temple, the fourth stage of grief, depression. Lulu is a Zora princess whose grief struck by the loss of her eggs, and instead of approaching the crisis she withdraws inwards and just stares out into the ocean, not uttering a single word. As a mother, she is the deep portrayal of depression. Ikana Valley is the final stage before finishing the game, and it is the fifth and final stage of grief, acceptance. Ikana Valley is an area in the game that is covered with death, but the individuals know they are dead, and they accept it. Now, let's recap momentarily. The only beings able to survive in the Lost Woods without repercussions are the Kokiri, because they have a guide, the fairies. Although Link was not a Kokiri, he was a hylian raised by the Great Deku Tree. Link was always bound to leave the forest, but to return to it may have some serious repercussions. When Navi left him at the end of the Ocarina of Time, Link went back to the Lost Woods in search of her. The Kokiri specifically speak of children lost in the woods. that eventually die and become Skull Kids, and adults who are lost in the woods as well become Stalfos. So, upon Link's search, it is not fair to say he perished there because he was lost without Navi. It was already confirmed by Nintendo that the hero shade in Twilight Princess, which is a Stalfos, is the hero of time from Ocarina of Time. There are also many clues that push more towards Link's untimely death rather than debunk it. The infamous Happy Mask Salesman phrase, "So you've met with a terrible fate," appears every time Link fails, and the moon crashes, killing him in the process. The 3-day sequence also indicates grief. When an individual is going through grief, he feels like they are trapped in a loop with no way out. Not to mention that Termina, which can mean a terminal, is filled with people that Link have known in his life. Theory number 4. The Tetra Force. I'm sure you've all heard of the many theories and clues surrounding the fact that there is indeed a Tetra Force, the missing middle triangle in the Triforce. Well, first of all, in the Hylian shield there is a fourth triangle under the Triforce, the extra golden triangle at the bottom of it, and the fact that Princess Zelda in Wind Waker is called Tetra, and so on. Actually, in Zelda games, the number 4 is more and more prominent than we think. There's the 4 elements in the Minish Cap, 4 giants in the Majora's Mask, 4 Links who, by the way, have the same colors as the 4 elements in the Minish Cap. And speaking of colors, the Triforce was brought to Hyrule by 3 goddesses who also are in 3 different colors, which made a lot of fans think that maybe there is a goddess with the 4th color. There's also the 4 light spirits in Twilight Princess, who each one of them was sent by a goddess, which means there must be a 4th goddess. But if there is a 4th fragment of the Triforce, what would it represent? The Triforce of Time? Hope? Or even the Triforce of Breaking Pots? The theory suggests the missing piece in the Triforce is the Triforce of Shadows. Well, so much for the Triforce of Breaking Pots. Shadow Triforce explains the birth of Dark Link. Do you remember the Shadow Medallion in Ocarina of Time? The medallion is violet, just like the missing color. Plus, there is an upside down triangle in the middle of it, just like the missing piece in the Triforce. So, you would think that this theory is pretty solid, right? Well, I hate to break it to you, but Nintendo has officially debunked this theory, saying in the most official and polite way possible that it's just a bunch of crap. I think Nintendo is living in the denial stage, which really tells us, if this is telling us anything, that Nintendo is in purgatory? Theory number 5. Hyrule Genocide. For this theory, we're going to go back to the Shadow Temple in Ocarina of Time. The Shadow Temple was built by the Sheikah, or the Shadow People. They are the same people who founded the Kakariko village. We know that the Sheikah were almost wiped out during the Hyrulean Civil War, defending the kingdom and the royal family. The only survivor of the Sheikah tribe was Impa, which begs the question, why are the Sheikahs the only race that was wiped out during the war? And why is Impa the only survivor? What did really happen in the war? As I mentioned before, the Shadow Temple was built by the Sheikah. If you play Ocarina of Time, you probably have dark memories of that temple as one of the most dark and scary temples in the whole series. All you have to do is look back at the different rooms in the dungeon to realize it was actually a torture chamber. In the temple, there is an inscription that reads as follows: "Here is gathered Hyrule's bloody history of greed and hatred." The boss of the dungeon is Bongo Bongo, It is speculated that he is the first possessor of Lens of Truth, or even the man who could see the truth himself. This man, who was a Sheikah, and who had an eye that had the same ability of the Lens of Truth. The Lens of Truth as an object gives you the ability to see things that are not normally visible to the naked eye, which is necessary to complete the dungeon. So, according to the theory, Bongo Bongo is the one who created it. Even the old man in the Kakariko village tells us that the man who could see the truth lived down the well. Another thing that comes to mind when we see Bongo Bongo is torture scars. From first glance to Bongo Bongo, we can go even further and say that he resembles a decapitated body with the head and limbs missing. So, Bongo Bongo was a Sheikah, but why was he tortured and executed? Well, in the Zelda manga, yes, I know, the manga is not canon, but just hear me out. In the Zelda manga, the Sheikah tribe rebelled against the royal family. That's why the royal family wiped out the whole Sheikah tribe. But why was Impa the only survivor, you may ask? We can say that she chose early the side of Hylians, or that her magic was essential to the royal family. If we go back to the inscription on the dungeon, it could mean that the genocide committed by the royal family torturing the Sheikah in their own temple to give an example of them. But did the Sheikah really rebel against the royal family? Maybe the royal family was grown jealous of the magical powers that the Sheikah possessed and felt threatened by them. Maybe Bongo Bongo, the man with the seeing eye, saw something dark and sinister in the royal family and decided to act upon it and rallied his people against them. But still, the royal family couldn't have killed the whole race. It sounds a bit impossible to do. Well, maybe the rest of the surviving Sheikah people were banished to the Twilight Realm. Look at Midona's mask. Yes, Yep, that's a Sheikah eye. Could this mean that the Twilight are originally the Sheikah people, who were banished by the royal family to the Twilight Realm? We know that the shadow crystals were made by the ancestors of the Twilight people. And if those ancestors are evidently the Sheikah, well, the Sheikah eye symbol make even more sense. Regardless of being banished to another dark dimension, or simply being wiped out, the fact that it is a genocide still remains, and all of this just so that the royal family could keep their hold over the land and hide their darkest secrets. Thank you everyone for watching this video, and remember, if you like the content, please encourage me by liking and subscribing. That would be a great help.